crisis, the price is too high. Another 1,000 dying every day, and we're lying if we say there is another way but love. Sacrificial love, unrelenting love, love. Christ-like love. How long, Lord, will we stay greedy, not cede thee our will? The way we're living is killing planet Earth, and we're billing our children when we need a rebirth of love. Sacrificial love, awe-inspiring love, love, Christ-like love. How long, Lord, will we bless injustice? Why must this stay this way? Each Black Life Matters, say to your apathy, then today stand up and face our hateful legacy with love. Sacrificial love, understanding love, love. Christ-like love, Christ-like love. How long, Lord, will I need this song, Lord, till we belong, Lord, to love.
Hey, Adam, thank you so much. That's Adam Thomas, Reverend Adam Thomas. Adam is the editor of How You Can Heal Our Divides and also did the cover design and interior design. So thank you, Adam, and great job for all your work on the book. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's kind of a special evening. Really appreciate you being here. There are basically three things I wanted to try to accomplish tonight. First is to thank people. So thank you to Adam, of course. Thank you to all the contributors that made this book possible. There were 33 folks that contributed to this book. And you know, them all responding so quickly allowed us to be able to get this out very, very quickly, which is what we wanted to do because we felt it was, you know, such a timely needed thing in our world right now. But even more importantly, the contributors themselves is the organizations that they represent. And that really is the purpose of this whole endeavor, is to, you know, shine a light and raise up awareness of all these organizations that are trying to help make the world a better place. So, you know, I really want to thank all the organizations that were involved in this as well. But of course, thanks to all of you that are part of the book launch team. We really appreciate your support. We really want to try to make this as good of an occasion for everyone involved as we can. So I really, really appreciate the involvement of so many folks in doing this. The second thing I want to accomplish is to make a couple of requests. So tomorrow is our big day, of course. It's the book launch day. And so if you can post to social media and write a review on Amazon or Goodreads. That would, of course, be greatly appreciated. I want to show you the @ that we have. So right above the How to Heal Our Divides banner, you'll see there is @HowToHealDivides, 2 with a numeric 2. So that is our tag on Twitter and on Facebook. And as of this afternoon, it's also our handle on Instagram. Not that I've used it yet, but when you make your social media posts, to the extent that you can tag us on any of those with How to Heal Divides, 2 with the numeric 2. So thank you for that. The final thing, the third thing, was just to let you hear from some of the folks who contributed to the book. As I said, we've had quite a large number of people who have contributed to this, and very quickly and very timely with great quality. So I want to, thank them, and also just let us hear their perspectives on, this effort and on the work that they've been doing. So we've got a whole series of folks that you're going to be able to hear from, and, we'll hold the questions until those folks have had a chance to talk, and then we will open it up to everyone. So first up is Amy Julia Becker. Hi, Amy Julia.
Brian.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. Want me to launch in?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
All right, great. So Brian keeps saying here, and he kept saying to me as he was putting this book together, that he really wants to spotlight these amazing organizations that I think the vast majority of people here are part of. And I kept saying, but I don't have an organization. I just wrote a book. And what I actually think is wonderful about including some people like me in this project, artists, writers, is that the work of storytelling is and can be, I hope, a part of the work of healing. And that is certainly why I set out to write the book that I wrote and continue the work that I do when it comes to writing and speaking. But I did very much think of myself as someone who is not an activist and not leading an organization, but doing this work of writing and of thinking about spiritual healing and renewal of our culture. I wrote a book called White Picket Fences. It came out in 2018. It's a memoir about being a person of privilege, being a white woman with education and affluence and married parents and being married myself and all of these things, and reckoning with what it meant to be a person of privilege. That was true all of my life, but became all the more true when I had a daughter 15 years ago now who was diagnosed with Down syndrome a few hours after she was born. So she was born into the same social situation that I had been born into. And she also was born into a history of discrimination and exclusion that I didn't have any personal experience with, even if I was aware of it. And so in reckoning with what it meant for my daughter Penny to be both inside and outside of this world, I began to recognize all the ways that these social divisions harm all of us. Not just those who are excluded from the inside, but also those of us who are considered insiders. And so I wrote a book to start beginning to tell my story and talk about that and spark conversation. And then when I went out into the world and started talking with people, what I found was people who said, yes, me too, but what do I do about that? How do I reckon with this? I'm scared. I've got a lot on my plate, even though I have a life of privilege. I don't have much time. I don't have much energy, and I'm afraid. And so I began to think about what it might mean to actually respond in a lifelong, transformative, holistic way to the pain and harm of social division in a way that actually leads towards healing for all of us. And what I came up with was we use our heads, our hearts, and our hands. And so using the head is to learn and think about news items, local history, family history, to just actually do some learning and listening. The heart is both vertical and horizontal, to be connected spiritually, to get the sustenance and the care that we need in order to engage with pain and suffering, as well as with joy and wonder in the world. The heart is also connecting us horizontally to friends, to mentors, to other people who will be potentially praying with us and walking with us on this journey. And then the hands is actually doing the work, whatever that might be. And it'll look different for each of us. But as I wrote about in How to Heal Our Divides, that work of the hands is individual, it's influential, and it's institutional. So that individual work might be something as small as, in my case, changing the books on our bookshelves so that my kids were exposed to characters when we were reading chapter books who were not all white. It might mean voting. It might mean making a decision to speak up at a family gathering. The influential level is that work of being on a local committee or PTO or a church council. And again, speaking up and using that influence in a way that is actually working towards healing divides. And then finally, there's the institutional level. And I thought I would just end tonight my section here by reading from the end of my chapter in the book. So this is talking about the institutional level. The final way that we can use our hands to affect change is on an institutional level. Institutions are conservative by nature. They think they need to remain consistent and predictable in order to flourish. And yet that same conservative stability can mean institutions become easily entrenched in historic injustices. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s demonstrated most clearly both the complexity and possibility of institutional change. Institutional change depends upon individuals banding together in common cause. As individuals change their personal practices and look for ways to use their local influence to undo injustice, we become more connected to other local citizens and leaders who are willing to work towards institutional change. The legacy of racism and other forms of discrimination in American society is far too great for any one of us to undo alone. But if we each use our head, heart, and hands to take the next small step, we can walk our way towards healing. So I'm grateful to be a part of this project and what I hope is taking some small steps together towards healing.
Well, Amy Julia, thank you so much. And, you know, you're selling yourself short here because you were one of the first people I talked to about this whole idea in the first place. And you also introduced me to some of the people that end up contributing to this book. So you don't lead an organization yourself, but you're an integral part of this project. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So next up, we're going to hear from Shane Claiborne. Hey, Shane, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I don't have great internet, so I'm going to watch you if I get glitchy. Am I doing okay so far?
Sounds good.
Good. I'm not going to talk too much because I'm Southern and I'm good at talking. So I'm just, I was just going to read a little bit because I can't say much in 4 minutes. So I'm just going to say that it has been a privilege to be a part of this. I see so many friends on the line tonight and that are contributors to the book. And it's just an honor to put our voices together. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from my chapter, which is entitled, It Begins with Humility, which incidentally, Adam, came out better once you put your hands on it. So thank you, bud. I met a man in Texas once who came up after a speaking event I was at, and he said to me, I'm a redneck, gun toting, whiskey drinking, pickup truck driving redneck. And he kept going. He said, I've been reading some of your books, though, and they've sort of messed me up. And I wanted to ask you if you'd pray with me because I consider myself a recovering redneck. We hugged each other and we prayed together. One of the things that, as I think of my life, one of the things that gives me a little bit of grace with other folks is to think of the grace that's been extended to me. Few of us would agree with ourselves if we met ourselves 10 years ago. I think of who I was 30 years ago and sometimes wonder how much patience I would have with my old self if I got into a conversation about politics. After all, I'm a bit of a recovering redneck myself. Turned up the Southern just a little bit there for you. And this gives me a little patience with other folks who are a work in progress, just like I am. I've come to see that self-righteousness is toxic, and it comes in a lot of different forms. There's the self-righteousness of fundamentalists that pride themselves on their own piety. I knew that really well growing up, but there's other forms of self-righteousness. I knew the conservative self-righteousness growing up that said, I don't smoke, drink, or chew, or go out with the girls that do. Hallelujah, glory. The purity culture that frowned upon the secular world, but that's just one manifestation of self-righteousness. I've come to know another version I'm all too familiar with in progressive circles. Many of us who are activists, myself included, are prone to a self-righteousness that frowns upon people who drive SUVs or drink from styrofoam cups or wear brand names from corporations that abuse their workers. I know that we need to take our moral convictions seriously, but we also have to be aware of the danger of that self-righteousness that builds our own righteousness by comparing ourselves to someone else's wrongness. Jesus didn't just come to make bad people good, but to bring dead people to life. He didn't come to give us guilt to the fullest, but life to the fullest. And I know a lot of people who are moral, but sort of mean. Maybe I'm one of them sometimes. They live responsibly, but they just aren't too much fun to be around. And I've come to think that I'd rather hang out with a humble conservative than a self-righteous liberal, and I'd rather hang out with a humble liberal than a self-righteous conservative. Humility is life-giving, and self-righteousness is always toxic. It's become clear to me that we can build community and movements by isolating ourselves from the people we disagree with. And we can also build movements by being open and inviting, seasoned with grace, even for those with whom we disagree. So it begins with humility for me. And G.K. Chesterton had a great line when he was once asked, what's the biggest problem in the world? The biggest obstacle to progress? And Chesterton said, I am. So thanks for letting me share. Thanks for everybody else that put so much into this book. I'm excited to release it with all of you.
Well, thank you so much, Shane. And, for those who don't know Shane very well, I mean, he leads an amazing organization called Red Letter Christians. And I think you can see why he's the author of several best-selling books. So it's really an honor to have him participate in this. And, I think we're all on a journey together and supporting each other in every way we can. And Shane does an awesome job of that. So thank you so much, Shane. So next up, we have Shannon Crossbear from the northern parts of Minnesota. How you doing, Shannon?
Doing well, Brian. Glad to be here. I mean, in the way Maganak Diabik Gizik, Nikishnaka Wabagonis. I wanted to greet you in my language, in the Ojibwe language. And because that's the way we would do it to our relatives. And so what I said was, hello, good evening, my relatives. My name is Shannon Crossbear, and I am Ojibwe and Irish. I'm a member of Fort William First Nation. I live on the beautiful shores of Lake Superior that you see behind me. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to contribute and to share and to learn. So Brian asked me if I would be a part of this project, and I took a moment. I had a little pause, and the reason that I had the pause is I was reflecting back to one of my relatives, Joe Flyingby, who's from Standing Rock and who is now no longer on this earth walk. And but I listened to him a lot, and he was an elder, and he spoke Lakota, and I didn't speak Lakota. And I spoke a little bit of Ojibwe, and he didn't speak Ojibwe, but we both spoke English. But Grandpa Joe would not speak English. He preferred not to speak English. And he said that the reason that he didn't speak English was that it messed with his thinking. That when you speak in a language, it tells you a lot about that particular culture and the way that they think. And he said that English just had too many words that were hurtful. And so he chose not to speak English. And so as I was thinking about how can I contribute, how can I use the English language and do so in a way that is not hurtful, but that is helpful. Because as Brian explained what the project was about to me, he said, you know, we're really trying to identify organizations that are really working toward healing this divide, and that we want to highlight those things. And then he said, another thing that really kind of resonated with me, he said, you know, our audience is those people who already know that there are issues, but now they want to know what to do about those issues. And so I thought about that for a long time and kind of reflected back on a line from a book by Forrest Carter, The Education of Little Tree. And in it, it says, Grandma said, when you come upon something good, that the first thing to do is to share it with whoever you can find. And that way, the good spreads out to no telling where it'll go, which is true. And so I too, like Amy, I'm not an organization, I'm an individual. And a grandmother, a mother, a sister, I have lots of grandchildren, and a person who has had an experience in this country as a tribal person, as a person in a population that has often been overlooked and invisible. And yet there are so many things that, ways that we can be helpful to each other in this healing process. And so, so I thought about that, and I thought about some other things that when I started to say, what can I do and what can I highlight? And how can I take the things that Amy was talking about with those hands to really say, what is it concretely that we can do? And how can we participate with others that are doing good work and elevate the work that's being done? So I'm going to read just a little bit from my contribution. Greetings, my relatives. We are all related. It's a phrase that you hear frequently in tribal communities throughout the country. From an indigenous worldview, we are all related. Learning to be a good relative requires one to spend time with one's relatives. And one of my relatives said, if you want to know about us, go to the library and read what's in the books. If you want to understand us, come and live with us. Many years ago, I was taught by one of the elders that when you went to a new person or community or a land, that you go with that humble heart. That you go with that humble heart and you and a helping hand. To respond to what is asked, not what you determine is needed. And always, always offer something that will be helpful, be it food or water or shelter. Offer a hand to work with or a hand to hold. It was solid advice then, and it's solid advice now. There are many bricks in the wall that has up to now divided us. And as we dismantle that wall, we can use the materials to build a bridge that finds shared spaces to do the work together. Bricks are made of concrete, and concrete actions can be taken to heal the divide. One can go beyond the awareness of the inequities, the acknowledgement of the past behaviors, past the right and wrong of it, to actively participate in helping and healing activities. And so I chose to highlight 4 particular organizations that are doing great work in what we call Indian country. And I think that that's so important because, you know, I had one experience where, you know, we can have good hearts and want to be helpful, and yet our brand of help may not be the thing that's being asked for. A number of years ago, there was an incident on one of our tribal lands in a tribal community where there was a school shooting. And all of the different helping federal agencies, you know, counselors, traumatic stress people, all came in to help. and even those from different faith bases. And yet, the one thing that the community was asking for was not the thing that they could get. And it seems so interesting to me that there were all these people with good intentions and good help. And yet when the people themselves say, what we need is this, that it didn't fall under the purview of any of those helping organizations. So, I think if you want to know how to make it better, there's two parts of that. Ask, or more than that, there's asking, there's listening, and there's responding. And so I am so honored to have an opportunity to kind of highlight the organizations, and it was Honor the Earth, White Bison, the Native Wellness Institute, and the Center for Native American Youth. And I'm looking forward. I haven't read every single contribution yet, but I'm in process, and I'm very honored to be with you and to continue to be in this healing journey together. So thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Shannon. I mean, you're an important part of this effort, and really appreciate the contributions that you've made. And, it's just really great to see, the kinds of things that you're saying, writing, and Amy, Julia, and Shane, all echoing each other. The humility, the heart, the hands, but it's all things that I don't think we can hear enough, but we need to do something. We need to act on it, not just talk about it. So appreciate you being a part of this, Shannon.
Thanks for listening.
So next we're going to hear from Seth Henderson, who is part of the Aspen Institute, and specifically a project called The Better Arguments. Isn't that a great idea? Seth, thanks so much for joining us and for being a part of this program.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for inviting us to contribute to this book. And it's nice to be with you all this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in time zone, who knows these days. And I just want to say, Shannon, something that you just said, I think it's always good to reiterate is oftentimes in this work, and hopefully you have heard this before, but those that are closest to the solution are those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I think that needs to be reiterated over and over, especially in nonprofit space and individuals trying to do good work, as we often may intellectually think we know the answer without actually having talked to the people who could actually probably help us figure out a much better solution. So as Brian said, my name is Seth Henderson. I'm a program manager with the Aspen Institute Citizenship and American Identity program, and I primarily focus on the Better Arguments project. So I'll read a section from the book, and I think that will just give you a good idea of the work that we do. So this is chapter 16 in the book, titled America Doesn't Need Fewer Arguments, It Needs Less Stupid Ones. The Better Arguments project is based on the idea that the key to addressing division isn't for people to argue less, but to argue better. Too often, calls for unity or civility, while well-intentioned, can mean quelling disagreement or pushing issues under the rug. These approaches are mistaken because there are real, serious issues facing our nation that need to be debated. When we decline to share our true opinions or ignore our true differences for the sake of politeness, we are really doing two other things, perhaps unintentionally. The first is that we are failing to take accountability for shared problems. The second is that we are giving up our public discourse to the most polarized voices. These voices already have enough power and enough of a platform. To heal our democracy and our civic culture, we all must be productively engaging in the civic debates of the moment. And besides, what's more American than arguing? The Better Arguments Project began in 2017 as a partnership between the Aspen Institute, Facing History and Ourselves, and Allstate. Together, we set out to address the question, what is a better argument? In collaboration with advisors and communities across the country, we distilled our framework for having better arguments, which include the 3 dimensions of arguing better and the 5 principles of a better argument. While the 3 dimensions provide the background and the context for every argument, the 5 principles highlight actions that we can all practice when engaging with those with whom we disagree. The 3 dimensions of arguing are history, emotion, and power. Today's civic arguments are rooted in all 3, and these dimensions help shape all our views in one way or another. By understanding where each of us is coming from, we can begin to lay the groundwork for empathetic and meaningful engagement across difference. So we ask, history, what historical narratives inform our views? Emotion, what emotions do we feel when debating a certain topic? Power, how are power dynamics implicit or explicit in shaping the argument? There are some divides that may be too big or too difficult to cross, however, such as if someone's fundamental humanity is being denied, or as misinformation becomes increasingly relevant, there are divergent conceptions of reality, unfortunately. Each person should consider what is non-negotiable for them in an argument. If the difference of opinion is within an acceptable range, however, the better arguments framework can help improve that debate. Once you've entered the better argument, there are 5 principles to practice in order to have a healthier debate. Principle number 1, take winning off the table. Principle number 2, prioritize relationships and listen passionately. 3rd, pay attention to context. 4th, embrace vulnerability. And 5, make room to transform. And that's the Better Arguments Project.
Very cool. You know, when I found out about what Seth and his team were doing, I was just like, okay, this is like a perfect fit for this project. And, you know, it's exactly the kind of thing that I really wanted to spread the word about. So, you know, thank you so much, Seth, for participating in this and for all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. So next up, we have Justin Hancock. And Justin is joining us from the great state of Texas. And he's going to talk to us about the Julian Way, the organization that he leads. Hi, Justin.
Hello, friends. And a couple of things before I start. I have no idea where my cell phone stand is, and I use my phone for Zoom. I have a 2-year-old, so I suspect I know where it is, but he's in bed now, so that might be a lost cause for the evening. And if I might take just a moment of personal privilege and say, if Shane is still on the call, when I was a somewhat backwards clinging conservative out of Lubbock, Texas, and read Irresistible Revolution and Jesus for President, and my brain blew up. Most of this is your fault, Shane. So I hope you're honored by that. But on to the Julian Way now that I have briefly fanboyed out. The Julian Way was started by my wife and I in 2013 when we moved back to Dallas so she could go to graduate school, and we were dealing with Medicaid and getting proof of social our paperwork for social services, and really experiencing the isolation and dehumanization that comes with a lot of social help programs in this country or state-based help systems in this country. And we began to ask, thanks to the influence of Elaine Heath and others who taught me evangelism at Perkins School of Theology, what could intentional Christian community have to say to the disability culture in the world, and how could that transform the dehumanizing aspects of the dominant culture and help those with disabilities find their vision and their purpose in the world. And what we have transformed into over the 7 to 9 years or so that we've been an organization is really an organization that focuses on two key principles, empowering those with what we call the diverse embodiments to find leadership positions in the church, to change the church from the bottom up and the top down, and walking with individuals with diverse embodiments to discover what is the role that God would have them play in advocating for their own story and advocating for their own journeys. And the reason it's called the Julian Way is I read Julian of Norwich in seminary and ran across the phrase that all of God's creation is God's good creation. And it really lit my world on fire, because I began to discover that what we frame as disabilities are really just marks of God's good and, ever expanding and ever challenging creativity. So we try to take the viewpoint that the things that we call disabilities are assets and come with their own history and journey that sort of dovetails with the broader civil rights movement in America. And part of that journey for us was writing the book, The Julian Way, A Theology of Fullness for All of God's People, that came out in 2018, that really looked at the development of disability civil rights on through to the ADA and beyond, and then spent the back third of the book tracing several key theologians down through Western Christian history to talk about what happens when we don't contextualize theology and how has that developed the way we have seen disabilities in the primarily Western world today. And then we end the book by dreaming about that intentional Christian community, the Julian Way, and what that might be like and what that might look like. I will tell you that what has been the most remarkable thing since 2013 that we have been the Julian Way, or that the Julian Way has existed, are the people that we walk with on a daily basis. The young man who has cerebral palsy struggles with other forms of mental health issues and is claiming an identity of a alternative sexuality, and told me one time, Justin, I don't think I have anything to contribute. And I looked at this young man, and I have his permission to tell this story, but I'm not going to use his name because his name's in my essay. And I looked at him and I said, man, you have a story. You're from a conservative background. You understand the Bible and the way that evangelicals talk. You're a man living with various forms of mental health issues. and you're gay. You're a 4-quadrant unicorn. There's no one like you. Don't suppress your vision because the world has told you that God doesn't have a place for you. And the Julian Way has been able to journey with that young man. And he's a 3rd-year seminary student now and will be our intern in the fall. So it's really helping empower individuals and helping churches and society discover the gifts and graces of folks with disabilities. And we are marching on and continuing to do that work. And I'm absolutely honored, flabbergasted, and thrilled to be in a collection with such luminaries as yourself. So thanks for supporting our work, and we look forward to supporting yours. So thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you so much, Justin. It's such a pleasure every time I get to talk to you and learn about all the great work that you're doing. And, I hope everyone can tell from just who you've heard from so far that, this isn't just a collection of people who are just sitting around with nothing else to do, right? These are like really thought leaders, from all around our diverse world. And, thank goodness they, agreed to take the time to participate in this. And thank goodness they're leading and contributing to the organizations that they are, because if it weren't for people like this, we'd really be in deep trouble. So I'd like you to hear from a couple more. Next up is Brandan Robertson. How you doing, Brandan?
Hey there. Thank you so much for making this happen. And as everyone said so far, it's been such an honor to be a part of this project and such an important topic, an important conversation in this moment of our collective history together. And so my name is Reverend Brandan Robertson. I lead a small nonprofit called Metanoia. And for the past 8 years, we've really been working at the intersection of both building bridges between communities like conservative evangelicals and the LGBT community, and organizing efforts to speak truth to power and put a spotlight on injustice within the religious world. And so that's what I decided to write my essay about. These two approaches that I've really learned over the past 8 years are so essential if we want to create change in the world that's substantive and will last. And so, like Shane, I come from a preacher background, so I'm not going to talk too much. I just want to read a little bit from the last half of the essay, just to give you a glimpse into kind of the strategy that we found effective through Metanoia, and that I really hope can be helpful as each of us try to be change makers and try to, as my chapter says, trouble the waters in order to bring about a more just and generous world. So I'll start with this portion. The ancient words of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 begin, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven." In every movement of justice, there is a time and place for strategies of both activism and advocacy in cultivating meaningful change. Without the advocates' willingness to reach across the divide and engage with those as their perceived enemy, it remains difficult to effect any true change of heart. Only when we're in proximity and in relationship with those who are different from us can we gain the trust and true change can emerge. This work often puts the advocate in a vulnerable space. It's a fearful thing for us to sit across from an enemy. Yet only through this process of humanization can we move beyond our ideological debates to a deep conversation about our different perspectives of the world. In 2015, I had a conversation with a prominent anti-LGBT evangelical leader. This leader had just spoken at a conference the day before and declared that LGBT people were sinful and that their attempts to be included in the church should be resisted at all costs. And here I was, an ex-evangelical, openly gay pastor sitting across from a man who didn't even believe I could be a Christian, let alone a pastor. During the course of our 45-minute coffee meeting, I asked to keep theology off the table. We weren't here to debate, but to get to know each other. I shared my experience of being bullied and threatened by religious leaders in his tradition, and my struggle to simply live into my calling as a minister of the gospel. He shared his sense of fear about the perceived agenda of me and people like me to fundamentally change the church by force and to force him to believe in things that he didn't. By the time the conversation ended, this leader didn't become LGBT affirming, and in fact, still isn't to this day. But what started was a real conversation between two people who fundamentally disagreed. And my sexuality moved from being a mere ideological debate point to an incarnated reality for him. Since that first coffee, we've talked a few times, and in fact, this leader has begun to think and reshape his own theological perspective, slowly but surely. That's real substantive change. But then there's also the important role of the activist. Without their willingness to speak up against harmful ideologies and shine a light on dangerous behaviors and leaders and organizations, injustice will surely flourish in the church and in society. Activists sometimes find themselves speaking against institutions and individuals that they have used to identify with. And sometimes this burns the bridge as the activist seeks to hold those institutions accountable. But to the activist, this cost pales in comparison to the harm that would be done if individual organizations were left unchecked. Fast forward to 2017, and I found myself in the opposite position to where I was in my previous story. I was at the general conference of the same denomination that leader was from. But this time I was part of an effort to expose the increasingly abusive posture of this denomination towards LGBT people. I was with an organization that had literally purchased billboards and flew in dozens of activists to help canvass folks attending the conference with literature about how extreme the denomination's position on LGBT issues had become. I had also found myself sitting in sessions and tweeting out the horrendous things that were being said from the stage, getting significant attention and putting pressure on the leaders of this denomination. Eventually, because of our oppositional stance, and we were taking the spotlight off of the conference and placing it on their backwards view, we were escorted out of the conference by security and had our registration revoked. Now, this level of activism is elementary compared to what many activists face. The consequences are often far higher than just being removed from a conference. But the point is this: when the denomination continued to move in more extreme and harmful ways in their posture towards LGBT, I realized that advocacy conversations weren't enough. They needed to be pressured to change. Lives of LGBT people were on the line, and young people deserved more than a few coffee meetings. They deserve people standing up and defending them publicly. There is a time and a season for both advocacy and activism. Most often, they should be occurring simultaneously. Sometimes we might be called to be advocates to people and places where our experience gives us a unique ability to build relationships and shift perspectives. Sometimes we might be called to be activists, making noise and stopping injustices from occurring in real time. Both approaches are crucial to creating a lasting change in the world and to following the radical rabbi who engaged in both activism and advocacy throughout his ministry. Christians should always be seeking to raise our voice and build relationships across divides, because this is how we will transform the world. So that's a little bit from my chapter. And again, just so honored to be a part of this project. And I really do hope that this resource and the organizations that are a part of this will be helpful in cultivating more change for the common good of absolutely everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandan. What a wonderful piece that you wrote. I just loved it. And, it's just another example for me why there's no one person that can do all of this, right? None of us each has the abilities and the different skill sets that are required for the different things that you all are engaged in. And, I could never have the kind of patience that you exhibited, Brandan. I mean, it's just one example, right? So I really hope that that's one of the things that people take away from this is that, it just requires a lot of folks, pulling the oars together. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So one more speaker for this evening, Kay Scarry is from the People's Supper. So yet another approach, different from anything else we've heard so far. Hi, Kay.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much. Friends, it is really just lovely to be able to be with you. I've been looking forward to today. And I lit a candle that I have with me because one of the hats I wear is niece, and I carry with me in this space my beloved aunts, Maggie, Trish, and Sal, who have all since passed, but who inspired a love of reading and writing in me. And so I sense them with me today. Another hat I wear is People's Supper Director. And so that means I spend many of my days sitting alongside community leaders and the question of what is it that needs healing here? Or the questions of what's the thing that keeps us from building a future here that works for everyone? And I sit alongside leaders all over the country as we gather folks for meals and for story sharing and challenge that. And this is a space where we can, as many of us have shared here, really sense and hold the sacredness of each other's humanity and also examine our own experiences and learn a thing or two about all that we don't see and about our communities and ourselves. And another hat I wear is aunt as well. And that's an important role I feel like I fill in the world. And so it feels, it matters to me that I can tell my sweet nieces and nephew that there are people thinking about repair and healing all over our country in this particular moment in time. So I'm similarly feeling a deep gratitude for the chance to be part of this and for those who are with us that are doing the work. So I will read a section from my chapter, and it's about when my pastor asked me to preach the Sunday after the 2020 election. So this is just a little teaser, if you will, of my chapter in the Lecture book alongside the other contributors. As I prepared that sermon, I turned over every single word, every single letter, recalling the voices of countless people I had shared a meal with over the years, the people who might hear this sermon from a million different vantage points. Some would be arriving to church that Sunday morning feeling an exhale. Some would arrive feeling an incredible sense of defeat. I made my best attempt to offer a sermon that held truth, that called us to work for justice, and that didn't really choose one side over the other, but still my church received a letter. My pastor called to share the news. A longtime member cited my sermon as the reason she was leaving the congregation after more than 30 years. It was clear to her that our church was headed towards, quote, darkness and oppression, end quote. I could stop there, that this woman was a longtime member of the congregation and that my sermon was the thing that caused her to leave our church would be hard enough. But this woman was also my mom's best friend, whose son I grew up with. This woman was and remains someone I would call beloved to me, whose home was a haven when my parents needed someone to look after me. Her doors were always open, and so her words were particularly piercing. I know this work of healing to be as much about our personal relationships as it is about our larger communities. I've been called by many a bridge builder, though I wrestle with the term. It's a complex role, if a rewarding one, trying to do the work of harm reduction in a society that's structurally unequal, working to set up spaces where we're connecting people without re-traumatizing those who are often on the margins in our country, balancing the need for accountability, reckoning with consequences of our actions, all while believing in people's capacity to grow. While I'm in the throes of trying to repair the breach across lines of difference, it helps me to remember that this work is, to use a Eugene Peterson phrase, a long obedience in the same direction. This long obedience is a commitment to the vision of a more just society and taking small steps towards that society over and over again. So friend, I meet you here in the question of what it means to build communities of belonging and equity, and questions of how we might repair relationships across lines of difference. And I meet you even in the moments of wondering if it's possible. I join you as a fellow journeyer, someone who believes in this work so deeply, even on the days when I don't really believe it at all. It's a long obedience in the same direction, and we can travel it together. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kay. I really loved, what you wrote, and appreciate it very much. She didn't talk too much about the People's Supper, but basically any organization that's got food as a key strategic element, I think it's like a really good idea. So you can read the rest of her chapter and go to their website and learn more, but let's just say they're on the right track. So, so I do want to, leave a little bit of time for opening up for Q&A. There's a couple of just other things that I wanted to point out. There are several other folks that are contributors to this book and lead different organizations that are on here with us tonight. I'm not going to try to call out everybody because I know I'll miss some, but I just want to thank them, publicly for all the work that they've done to contribute to this. And I also wanted to make it clear to everyone that this is not done. Just because the book is available tomorrow, this project is going to live on. And in a couple of different ways. One is that, we'll have a podcast, we'll have social media and emails and a continuation of the promotion of what all these great organizations are doing. But I'm also very hopeful that we'll end up doing more, having a second book, having additional online events, finding other organizations that deserve to be highlighted and to be built up. So if any of you have got candidates for that, that you'd like to include in future incarnations of this project, please contact me and let me know. So with that, I don't want to keep us all night, but I'd love, to be able to just open up for a few minutes so that anybody on the call can ask any questions that you'd like to. Probably the best way is for you to raise your hand under the reactions button on the Zoom portal. But if not, you can type it into the chat box or just unmute your microphone and say hello, whatever you'd all prefer. So I'm going to pick on someone if no one. So let me call on a couple of the folks who were contributors who are on with us tonight. Calenthia, would you like to say hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure.
All right. Hi, everybody. Hey, Shane, it's been a while. So yeah, is there a specific question or?
No, I mean, for folks who haven't read the book yet, let us know what Roots of Justice is all about.
So, well, Roots of Justice is an anti-racism organization that does trainings. And I think we're unique because we do trainings with, we use a faith analysis. But I think, I'm trying to get back in the space of writing the chapter. And I think one of the things writing in this kind of way it's a healing space for me. I think that I got involved with Roots of Justice when it was called Damascus Road. If you don't know the name Roots of Justice, you might know Damascus Road. And it started within the Mennonite Church or within Mennonite Central Committee. I don't know, back in the late 90s. And it was, it was, when it was started, I thought, well, this is different. This is interesting, very cynical, but what's this going to be about? Until I went through a training myself, and so a lot of my own wounds and my own pain came up as a Black woman who has spent a lot of time in majority white churches. And so I just thought, I've got to do this, I've got to get involved with this group. And so that was kind of, it was really getting involved it was more selfish. It was a healing space for me. And so it's grown into an organization. It's since left Mennonite Central Committee. We still have a good relationship. But we do analysis training around systemic racism. How do we get systemic racism out of our houses of faith? How do we acknowledge it, see it, pinpoint it, and get it out? Or can we? I really liked what, I don't know if Kay is still here, but boy, what Kay reading her piece was just because there are days when you just don't believe. Do we overthrow the system? Do we tear it down and start new? Can a system be repaired? And so I think there's lots of ways to think about that. And so trying to do some of that and stay connected to my faith roots. I've left many times. I've been in this game a long time, and it does feel like a game sometimes, but it's not, because we're dealing with people's real lives. So yeah, thank you, Brian. I was very, I'm busy. It's kind of like, oh God, this is another thing. But I'm really honored to have shared the little bit that I was able to share with my essay. So thank you for the invitation. I really do appreciate it.
Well, it was so important to include you. And I mean, I have to, thank all of you who contributed, because I know you're all ridiculously busy. And, to have yet another commitment and deadline and, whatever, was a big ask. And, so many, you all stepped up to the table just so wonderfully and so quickly, right? I mean, this was just an idea in November, and 6 months later, now it's a book that's for sale, with all of you guys putting together just excellent contributions. So, that's just kind of a semi-miraculous thing for which I'm just so grateful for everybody taking time out of their important work to do this. But again, I'm just hoping that, all boats will be raised, right? I think all of us supporting each other and bringing together awareness of what each other is doing just has to help. And so thank you all for that. And as Scott mentioned in the chat, the focus on action, not talk, right? That's what you all are all about. And that's what I think is just, so incredibly important. So thank you, Calenthia. I'm going to call on a couple of other of our contributors, see if you can guess who it's going to be. Vanessa, I'd like you to talk about Vote Common Good. You've heard already just, tonight of this incredible diversity in terms of the types of organizations, the types of efforts that, we pull together. And Vanessa's got another, great example. Hey there.
Hi, thanks so much. I was not prepared to talk, but I'll
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. So I wrote one of the chapters, and I just called it a Vote Common Good story because there are several of us that were involved with Vote Common Good. My story is called a Tale of Two Buses. And I wrote about my experience in a really personal way. I don't lead Vote Common Good. I think I'm a product of it. And I think that makes for an interesting experience for people to read about. I think I am what Vote Common Good was trying to do in this last election cycle. So Vote Common Good, one of their goals this last election cycle was to help evangelical voters and fundamentalist voters to kind of cross the line of what they had been trained to do. And I was a kid who grew up in a private Christian school and pretty intense fundamentalism, spent 10 years in really traditional church ministry. And then a decade into our ministry, my husband and I kind of made a pivot, went through deconstruction about 15 years ago and started a church called Vintage Fellowship in Northwest Arkansas. And we are just a real experimental community. And I was able to be ordained in that context, and I'm co-pastor of the church. And the 2016 election when Donald Trump was elected, just kind of, it was deeply personal for me. I mean, like it was for a lot of people, and it became an impetus for me to make the leap into becoming an activist. so I was able to tour with Vote Common Good. They it's kind of hard to describe, but they travel all over the country doing socially distanced events, a lot like a church camp kind of meeting, getting people to explore the idea of voting differently than what they had been trained to do. And so I just told my story from my very personal angle of growing up in private Christian school, experiencing the abuse that so often takes place in those contexts, and then growing up and eventually becoming an adoptive parent, and my daughter is Latina, and the El Paso shooting, and how deeply personal that was for me. And then my husband ran for Congress in 2016 as well. And so just that evolution as an activist. And really the biggest divide I think that I talk about is the one that's internal, because we can't do any of the work that we do until, or maybe along with the internal work. And so I think a lot of people are reading about what they should do or what they could do, but they don't know what it feels like to do it. And I think that's what I wrote about. So, yeah.
I mean, the effort and the results that the Vote Common team made, toward the election was just such an amazing thing. And I don't know that many people really understand the magnitude of what you all accomplished, and it was incredibly important, and I just really admire that. So
I was super proud and thrilled to be a part of it. So we needed to shave off a percentage, a very small percentage of votes, and we were able to do it. We have the math to show that we were able to get those people to make that leap, and it feels pretty exciting.
Well, you picked your targets really well and executed really well, and that made a huge difference. So in any event, I thank you all for joining us tonight. Please don't forget tomorrow to use @tag @HowToHealDivides and make as much noise as you can, and help make the world a better place. So Adam, maybe you can close us off with another song.
Yeah, so we're running a few minutes behind, but hopefully this will be a good way to end us tonight. I wanted to sing a song about sort of from God's perspective, because this work that we're about is draining and takes a long time, and so this is a song about personal growth within following God. So here we go. Oh, my child, I see you there in the wild of hopeless despair. I hear your cry, oh Lord, how long? Don't fear, your cry will make it a new song. I know the person you are meant to be. You'll grow again more gracefully. I'll show you what I would have you see. I'll go before you and you follow me. Oh, my child, you move too fast. Your life is piled with too many tasks. Your worth is not based on what you do. Your birth's enough for me to love you. And I know the person you are meant to be. I'll slow you down with my constancy. I'll show you what I would have you see. I'll go before you and you follow me. Oh, my child, what stirs your heart? Have you exiled every caring part? You say the world's too broken to save. No way that's true, I just need you to be brave. And I know the person you are meant to be. I'll throw you from your complacency. I'll show you what I would have you see. I'll go before you and you follow me. Lift up your eyes, lift them to the hills. Lift up your eyes, lift them to the hills. Lift up your eyes, lift them to the hills. Lift up your eyes, and there my help you'll see. 'Cause I know the person you are meant to be. I'll throw you from your complacency. I'll slow you down with my constancy. You'll grow again more gracefully. I'll show you what I would have you see. I'll go before you and you follow. I'll go before you and you follow. I'll go before you and you follow me.
Woo! Adam, those were amazing songs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very cool.
I wrote both of those during the pandemic last year.
Wow. Well, I could tell they were original. They're really great.
Thank you.
So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate all your support, and get out there tomorrow. We'll see y'all soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Good night.
Congratulations.